One myth that's out there is that what we're doing is printing money. We're not printing money. The amount of currency in circulation is not changing.
Is that tax money that the Fed is spending?
It's not tax money. The banks have accounts with the Fed much the same way that you have an account in a commercial bank. So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing. Now, you might ask the question, well, the Fed's going out and buying $2 trillion of securities. How do we pay for that? And the answer is that we paid for those securities by crediting the bank accounts of the people who sold them to us. And those accounts at the banks showed up as reserves that the banks would hold with the Fed. So the Fed is a bank for the banks. Banks can hold deposit accounts with the Fed, essentially, and those are called reserve accounts. And so as the purchases of securities occurred, the way we paid for them was basically by increasing the amount of reserves that banks had in their accounts with the Fed. So you can see this here. This is the liability side of the Fed's balance sheet. Of course, assets and liabilities, including capital, have to be equal. So the liability side had also to rise near $3 trillion, as you can see. Now, take a look first, as you look at this, take a look first at the light blue line at the bottom. The light blue line at the bottom is currency, Federal Reserve notes in circulation. Sometimes you hear that the Fed is printing money in order to pay for the securities we acquire. And I've talked about that in giving some conceptual examples. But as a literal fact, the Fed is not printing money to acquire these securities, and you can see it from the balance sheet here. The light blue line is basically flat. The amount of currency in circulation has not been affected by these activities. What has been affected is the purple area. Those are reserve balances. Those are the accounts that banks, commercial banks, hold with the Fed, and they're assets of the banking system and they're liabilities of the Fed, and that's basically how we pay for those securities. And so the banking system has a large quantity of these reserves, but they are electronic entries at the Fed. They basically just sit there. They're not in circulation. They're not part of any broad measure of the money supply. They're part of what's called the monetary base. But again, they certainly aren't cash. Then there are other liabilities, including Treasury accounts and a variety of other things that the Fed does. We act as the agent, the fiscal agent for the Treasury. But the two main items you can see are the notes in circulation and the reserves held by the banks.